Hey, so
Good morning. Welcome to Compass. Our mission is navigating people to God. My name is Nate. I'm one of the pastors here. So glad that you're worshiping with us, whether that's in person, that's at home. We're glad that you're here. And if you're a guest, an extra special welcome to you today. We'd love to meet you. We'd love to connect with you. If you're in the room, we have a gift for you. You can stop by the Next Steps area, which is just by the blue curtain on your way out, and we're going to give you a gift. If you're at home anytime in the service, you can text the word Connect NFW to 94,000. We're going to send you a gift as well. It's just our way of saying we're glad that you're here. And man, it's awesome to see this theater filled today. I know you're here for the free food. You're really not here to listen to me. But we're glad that you're here. And we got food trucks and Texas ice cream truck after the service today. So hang out and enjoy some food and fellowship. And you can stay dry underneath the awning there. So it's going to be a great day. Excuse me. Well, you know, when I was a kid, my dad and I, on Monday nights, we would always sit down together and we would watch WWF Monday Night Raw. Now, this was back in the day when Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, and then one of my favorites, oh yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage, like those were the guys that were kind of the stars. And they always tended to go against these lesser known opponents. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're like, why in the world did you watch that fake wrestling? Like, why in the world would you watch something so unwholesome as WWF? Well, I'll tell you why. I was there for the acting. I mean, the acting is on point, right? And I got to tell you this too. Like, I was there for all the entertainment, like guys getting hit over the head with 2x4s and chairs and getting thrown out of the ring. That was the stuff that I was there for. But I was thinking about it too. You know, when it came to wrestling, these stars, they would always get into the ring and they might have a match against somebody who was a lesser known opponent, and it would start out and there would come this point that was obviously scripted where the star wrestler, it looked like he might lose the match. And he would get down on the mat and the referee would count 1, 2, and right before the 3 count, he would kick out and the match would go on, and the star wrestler like Hulk Hogan, he would go down again and it looked like he was going to lose. But then there was another point where in the script, like the writer must have said like, now's when you're going to flip the switch. You're going to get this superhuman strength and you're going to turn it around. And you're going to look like you weren't just about to lose the match. And that's when the star wrestlers, they would go into full attack mode. And it was just a matter of time until they used what I will call the finishing move, right? For those of you who are Mortal Kombat fans. And all these guys, all the stars, they had that one move that you knew that when they used that move, it was over for the other guy. Like one of the newer wrestlers out there today is John Cena. He's got this, when he waves his hand in front of the face, you're like, that dude's done, right? Or then there was Hulk Hogan. Like, he would go up to the edge of the ring, he'd put his hand up here, he'd get the crowd hyped, and then he would rip his shirt open, and you're like, that guy's done for. And then one of my favorite wrestlers was this guy named Sting. And Sting had what was called the Scorpion Deathlock. That was his finishing move. And when a guy got in that, you knew it was just a matter of time till they were hitting the mat and they were saying these words, I give up. Now, those words, I give up, I think when we hear them, they can seem like a negative thing, right? Like it's in our minds, it's this idea of calling it quits or that we're done or that we're tapping out. But what I want to show you today is that the words I give up are actually words that I think that we should say sometimes in our life for things that are going on in our lives that actually they have the power and the potential to change our lives. And that's what we've been looking at as we've been in this series over the last few weeks called Say. If you missed any of the weeks of this series, I'd encourage you to go back and watch those. But what we're hoping to do through this series is give you some words that you should say on a regular basis that have the power to change your life and the potential to change your life. That's what this series is all about. So we want to continue that conversation today. So if you've got a Bible or you've got a Bible app on your smartphone, you can turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 19. And it's in 1 Kings chapter 19 that there's a story that we're going to look at today that I think can hopefully be helpful for all of us Because my guess is that we've all had those moments in life where maybe you've been at the point where you've felt discouraged or you've been beaten down. Maybe that's where you find yourself today. Maybe you find yourself at this place where you're just not sure of all that's going on. Maybe it feels like life has you in this submission hold of sorts, and there's just no way out. And the story that I want to look at today is the story of this guy named Elijah. And it's through Elijah's story that I think we can all see that there is a positive way to move forward in the midst of the discouragement or the despair or the difficulties that you might be up against. And so look at what it says in 1 Kings chapter 19, starting in verse 1. This is the story of Elijah I want to look at today. It says, Now Ahab is this evil king of Israel at the time. He told Jezebel, who is the evil, powerful queen of Israel at the time, everything that Elijah, and we're going to find out Elijah is this prophet. I'll get into that more in a minute. Everything that Elijah had done and how he had killed all the prophets with a sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, may the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them. Now understand the context of this story here. To understand it, let me give you a little bit of backstory of what's just happened prior to this in 1 Kings chapter 18. Now I just said that Elijah is this prophet of God, right? And being a prophet of God meant that you were one that God spoke to, and God would give you some words to say to the people of Israel on his behalf. And so being a prophet meant that sometimes the words that God gave you to say meant that you were stepping on the toes of people. And you would have to go to them and you would have to call them out for some of the things they were doing. Like prophets, they would call out people's way of living, and they would say things like this: you're ignoring the poor and the oppressed, or you're mistreating one another, or what Elijah was going to say is you're worshiping these false gods, these idols, and you need to change it. And what would happen is that sometimes the people would hear this and they would realize where they had kind of gone awry, and they would change things. But then there were some people, like Elijah would tell them, or a prophet would tell them what they were doing, and they didn't like being told what to do. Can anybody relate to that? Like you just don't like being told what to do? Well, that's what would happen with some of the people. And so for the people who didn't like being told what to do, what they would do is they would oftentimes run these prophets out of their towns, or they would threaten them, or they would even attack them and try to kill them. And for Elijah, this is where we find him at this point in his story. You see, Elijah has confronted the leaders of Israel, these false prophets who are worshiping these false gods, and he's called them out, and he says, you've abandoned the one true God. You've decided to worship these idols, and you need to turn away from this. Which leads, when he says this, it leads to a battle royale of sorts between Elijah and these 450 false prophets. Now, 450 to 1, those are not good odds, right? Those are not good odds in Vegas. Those were definitely not good odds for Elijah. But Elijah, he's not worried because he's got the one true God on his side. And so he's got all 450 prophets gathered around him. And he says this: hey guys, I got an idea. Let's see whose God is the one true God. And here's how we're going to do it. You're going to build an altar, and I'm going to build an altar, and whoever's God rains down fire from heaven and burns down the altar, that is the God that we ought to worship. That's the God that we will follow. And these guys, they hear this, and they agree to it. I imagine they had to be like, man, this guy, listen to Elijah here. Like, this guy's an idiot. Like, we got 450 to 1 odds. We are going to win. He's going down. And so they agree to this, and they begin building their altars. The 450 prophets, they build one altar to their gods. And then on the other side, Elijah, he builds this one altar to the one true God. And Elijah's like, you know what, I'm gonna go one step further. He's like, actually bring me some water. I'm gonna douse all the wood and make it really wet. And then I'm gonna put water all around it. And I'm gonna show you that my God is the one true God. And he goes, you know what? And even better, you guys can go first. So like, if it happens, then I don't even get to prove myself, right? And so he says, go ahead, start praying to your gods. And they start praying to their gods. Well, what happens is their gods, they don't respond. There's nothing from their gods. And my guess is there's this moment, because I'm reading 1 Kings 18 where Elijah is like, hello, McFly, anybody home? Or something like that. Because he says this here in verse 27, 1 Kings 18. It says, at noon, Elijah began to taunt them, right? I like this part of Elijah. He says, shout louder, surely he is a God. Perhaps he's deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping. He must be awakened. Now, I got to be honest with you. When I'm reading Elijah here, I'm like, that is an Elijah I would like hanging out with. Because he reminds me of myself when I was in middle school and high school and even in college, whenever I'd step on the basketball court. Like I'd be that guy trash talking the other guys, like, that the best you got? Man, you got to build a house with all those bricks, right? Or I'd be like, man, I'm the bus driver. I'm taking you all to school, right? Or I'd just talk trash to him. And that's what Elijah is really doing here. He's literally like, where's your boy at now? Where's your God at now? He says things like this. He says, maybe he fell asleep. Or this next one that he says, maybe he's busy, which if you translate the Greek, what he was really saying is, maybe your God is too preoccupied on the toilet. That's what it means, right? So he was having a little fun with him. Or maybe, he says, or maybe he just has a hearing problem, so you need to yell a little bit louder. And so what do the prophets do? They start yelling even louder, but again, there's nothing. And that's when Elijah, he looks over to the DJ that's there kind of at this event. He's like, yo, cue the track, right? And then all of a sudden, you can tell everybody, I'm the man, starts playing, right? And Elijah, he starts calling out to God, and God rains down fire from heaven, and God delivers the one true God of the Bible. He demonstrates his power. Now remember how I said that there's this king at the time, his name is Ahab, and his wife Jezebel, they're terrible people. Right? Well, they're there at this moment. They're not fans of Elijah. They don't like what they see happening. And so we read that this is when we get to chapter 19 where they send out this death threat against Elijah, like, we're going to take you down. But you would think, like, even in this moment, right after Elijah has just had this huge and massive victory in his life, like, Elijah would be like, yeah, I don't care. Like, you can say whatever you want, and he'd be completely unfazed by this. Like he just had one of those ultimate lifetime wins in his life, in his story. Like, this is huge. Like, he just taken down 450 to 1 odds. He just done it. He's seen God do these amazing things. He's proven like he's the smartest guy in the room because he's following the one God that actually can deliver on his promises. And he's seen God show up for him. But what we're about to see next is in Elijah's story is that he's at one of his lowest moments that you will find in his story. Look back at just verse 3 and following. It says this: Elijah was afraid. He ran for his life. And when he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left his servant there while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to die. He came to a broom bush, sat down under it, and he prayed that he might die. I've had enough, Lord, he said. Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors. Then he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. So Elijah, in this moment, after he finds out the king and queen are out to take him out, it says that he starts running for his life, and he runs away for everything. He's running for his life, but actually what Elijah was doing in this moment is he was running from the life that God had called him to. Because think about this, right? Like even though God had just come through for him in this huge way, even though God had delivered on his promise, the list of problems for Elijah, it just seems too big. And he's exhausted. There's a bounty out for him. He knows it. He's lonely. He's anxious. He's worried. He's alone. He's afraid. Have you ever experienced these things in your own life? You know, what Elijah does is oftentimes, I think, what we tend to do when life gets difficult, when the discouragement of all that's going on seems to set in, right? When we're not doing well, the problem is this, though, that rather than running from community, we should be running towards community. Rather than running from God, we should be running towards God. Rather than running from the life that we have, we should be running towards the life that God has given us. But what Elijah does is exactly what we tend to do. I like what commentator Warren Wiersbe says about Elijah at this point. He says, if Elijah could have described to a counselor how he felt and what he thought, the counselor would have diagnosed his condition as a textbook case of burnout. Elijah was physically exhausted. He had lost his appetite. He was depressed about himself and his work and being controlled more and more by self-pity. He isolated himself, and worst of all, he wanted to die. In this moment, Elijah, he's He's done. He's like, I'm finished. I'm through. He doesn't see how there's going to be anything good that can come from the situation that feels like he's in. And in this moment, in his mind, his world is crumbling around him. And it's in that moment, as Elijah thinks about this, that all of a sudden, my guess is as he's sitting there under that tree, he just yells these words, I give up. And if I'm honest today, if we're honest today, I believe that many of us here in this room or at home, we've wanted to say those words for however long. Or maybe for some of you, you've been saying those words for a while. Like 2021 came around and you thought like, here we are 5 months in, you thought it was going to be different than how 2020 was. But 2020 has just seemed to roll right into 2021. Things haven't calmed down. Like you thought your kids were going to get back to a normal routine. You thought your marriage or your relationships or your career, it was going to take a turn in the positive direction. But ultimately, what you found is that there still seems to be nothing to celebrate. Maybe for some of you, you found yourself whispering those words, I give up. Or maybe it's been more like Elijah probably was, and you've yelled those words, I give up, God, I'm done, I'm through. Or maybe for some of you, it's gone further than that. Like for some of you, I give up is more real than that today. Maybe your anxiety is pressing in and you just don't know where to turn. Maybe worry and fear has become what consumes you throughout your day. Maybe it's depression or despair. Some of you, you feel alone or sad or isolated. Maybe today is a day where you find yourself hurting unlike any other time. Maybe for someone in this room or even at home, you've been at this point where life feels like it's just not worth it anymore. You don't even know if you can continue on. Maybe today the words, I give up, those hit a little bit different. And listen, I want you to hear this today. If that's where you find yourself right now in this moment, like we want you to know that we want to come alongside of you. We want to help you. We want to point you in the right direction. Like we want to give you the people and the resources that can help you in the midst of what you're going through, that you don't have to do this alone. We've got this incredible ministry here at Compass called His Story that we partner with, and we want to put you in touch with the right people. And so if that's something you're struggling with, if you're in person or at home, like please talk to somebody, reach out, tell me afterwards, and we'll make sure that we walk alongside you and we point you to the right places and the right people who can help you out. Because look, I realize that sometimes when people walk into the church and you're going through a season like this, maybe things that you've been struggling with, they're really serious. Like you're at that moment where you're just hanging on for wit's end and you're at the verge of giving up. The things that you've heard, or maybe things like this, like you just need to read your Bible more and you'll be fine. Or you just need to pray more and God will give you the strength that you need, or you just need to have more faith. And listen, if that's what you've heard or that's what you've been told, like I realize for some of you, that's not very helpful. Actually, those words have probably created more problems for you. Because think about it, the solution that maybe you've been told when you're on the verge of giving up is more like this: do more, read more, pray more, have more faith. And I realize that those things are just not very helpful for some of you. And I get some of you might be like, okay, so if I'm not supposed to do those things, then are you saying that I should say these words, I give up, Pastor Nate? That's what you're saying I should say? Like, really? Because how is that helpful? You know, earlier I said I give up is a phrase that can mean I'm done or I'm through or I'm finished or it's over. But in the world of faith, it can carry a completely different meaning, and that's what I want to show you today. In the context of faith and this faith journey that we're on, giving up is a way for you to find your life. And that's what I want to show you with these last few minutes that we have today. Actually, there's a word that has been used throughout the history of Christianity that really explains best where we're headed today. And the word that I want to give you is this word surrender. And I know surrender is something like you probably have heard thrown around a lot at church if you've been in church for a long time, or maybe this is your first time, you're like, surrender? Really? Like, what? Why would I surrender? That seems weird to me. Like you might be thinking, I'm not sure how surrender fits into this whole faith thing and Jesus thing, because maybe when you think about surrender, what comes to your mind is like hands in the air and you're like, I surrender. Or maybe when you think about surrender, it's like you're the opponent and you're kind of hunkered down and there's nowhere to go and you've got to wave the white flag. That's what you think of when you think of surrender. If you Google the word surrender, this is what definition comes up: to cease resistance to an enemy or an opponent and submit to their authority. And I wonder how many of us hear the word surrender and we hear it in church, and what we think of is that it's about surrendering to this enemy or this opponent. And when we hear that, then what happens is we begin to put enemy and opponent beside God. And we think of God as an enemy or an opponent, but I want you to hear this today. God is not your opponent. He is not your enemy. I get some of you might think otherwise. Like you're going through a difficult situation in your life right now, and you might be like, man, because of all this going on, I don't see how there's anything good that's happening in my life. If God was good, then he would be for me, he would help me, but I think God's against me because of all that's going on. Like I get that's where some of you might be today. Some of you are just turned off to the whole idea that God could be a good God. You see, for some of you, it's hard to surrender because you see God as an enemy. It's hard to surrender to anyone that you see as an enemy. I think sometimes when we think of God, the idea or the visual that comes to our mind is like Bruce Almighty, when we're like, smite me, almighty smiter. Like that's how we see God. But God is not against us. He's not out to get us. He's not the enemy. God wants to walk alongside us. He wants to help us in our times of need. I think when it comes to Christian surrender, though, there's two words in that definition from Google that I think we have to understand that actually they fit into this Christian surrender. And those two words are this: cease resistance. Because this is honestly what we have to do. We have to stop resisting God and his goodness towards us, and we have to stop seeing God as this enemy in our lives. Actually, I want you to understand this today. It's when you and I give up control to God in our lives, that is when we gain control. It's when you surrender control to God that you actually gain the control that you need in your life. And that's what we see in Elijah's story. Let me show you how. Now, this is right after Elijah has just said those words, I give up. Look at what it says in the second half of verse 5. It says, all at once, an angel touched him and said, get up, eat. He looked around, and there by his head were some baked bread over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate, drank, and then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time, touched him, and said, get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you. And so we read that this angel of the Lord comes to Elijah, and it says, yo, Eli, wake up, man. He's like, hey, while you were sleeping, I took it upon myself over some hot coals to bake you some hot and ready Krispy Kreme donuts, right? And, oh, by the way, I brought a little Topo Chico with a hint of lime. You can wash it down. Eat and drink this stuff. It's going to help you. And so Elijah, he eats it and he drinks it, but then it says he goes back to sleep and he falls asleep again. And the angel of the Lord comes again. He's like, yo, Eli, I know you've been resting, but I just want you to know, like, I am the original creator of crumble cookies. And I made the best-selling ones that sell out every day at the store. I made those for you. And if you eat those, like, you're going to get the strength that you need, and it's going to help you. And so Elijah eats again. And, as I was studying for this message, I was thinking about my own journey right now. Like, I'm on this diet a Daniel plan where I'm just trying to watch my carb intake, and I'm not trying to eat a lot of sweets and sugars and stuff. But I thought what God was really trying to tell me here is that carbs are good, and that you can be healthy on an all-carb diet, so I'm getting away from the Daniel plan starting tomorrow. Okay, wishful thinking, right? But check out what happens next in the story. It says, so he got up, he ate and he drank, and strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he had reached the mountain of God. So what we see is that after carb loading, Elijah, he has the strength that he needs. And for 40 days and 40 nights, he's got his energy back. And ultimately, what this moment in the story of Elijah shows us is this. It's always worth surrendering to God because he will always take care of you. Now notice, I didn't say that God will sometimes take care of you or that sometimes it's worth surrendering to God. No, I said it's always worth surrendering to God because he will always take care of you. And I know some of you might think, man, that's too good to be true. It seems too good to be true, Pastor Nate. That your anxiety and your fear, You're stressed that they are at these all-time highs, and you might be thinking, I just don't see how that is all going to change or shift or things are going to turn around. But here's the thing about anxiety and fear. I want you to hear this today. It's always based on false need and false belief. Because anxiety says this to us. It says, I don't get what I think that I need, so then I am no longer secure if I don't get those things. But because it's a belief, anxiety also says this about God. It says, God is not good enough to take care of my needs. I like this quote and how it relates to how anxiety causes false gods and beliefs about God, false beliefs about God. It says this: anxiety shrinks the power of the gospel because it presents a false gospel, one of self-reliance rather than reliance on God. Here's what Elijah's story shows us. God will always prove your anxiety wrong when you give up and you surrender to him. Because take a look at what happens. After these 40 days and 40 nights of Elijah wandering around, it says this. It says, verse 9, there he went into a cave and he spent the night, and the word of the Lord came to him. What are you doing here, Elijah? He replied, I have been very zealous for the Lord God Almighty. The Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, put your prophets to death with the sword. I am the only one left, and now they are trying to kill me too. Can you hear Elijah in this moment? Like God comes to Elijah, he's in the cave, and he's like, hey, Elijah, what are you doing in the cave? And Elijah, he's like, God, I've been trying to do the right things. I've been trying to live for you. Like I've been going to church on a regular basis. I've been studying your word. I listened to what you said. I've been doing my job good. Like I told the people exactly what you told me to say, and they want to kill me for it. So I don't think that I should go on anymore. Why should I keep going? And God responds by saying this, verse 11 and following. The Lord said, go out, stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart. It shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. Catch what God's doing here. He's saying, Elijah, I just want you to understand, I have been with you the whole time. The problem is that you were looking for me in some big way to reveal myself, but I was showing you in the little moments. I have been here the whole time. The problem was you allowed the noise of all that was going on in life to drown out the fact that I was trying to let you know that I've been here and I never left your side. And I love how God speaks to Elijah here. It's not in the wind. It's not in an earthquake. It's not in a fire. It's in a whisper. Why did God choose to speak to Elijah in a whisper? Think about this. When someone whispers, what do you have to do? You got to focus. You got to cease. You got to lean into a whisper. And listen, that's what God wants. He wants you to lean towards him. He wants you to lean into him and say, God, I can't do this on my own. I'm struggling right now. I'm going through a lot. I need your help. I need your power. Would you help me through this difficult time? God, I give up. You see, the moments that you want to give up most are the moments that God is closer than you ever would believe. And he wants to speak to you. You just got to listen for the whisper. And Elijah heard God's whisper. And what Elijah's story shows us is this, is that God is always with us in our darkest moments. You know, there's a show, Amanda and I, my wife Amanda and I, we like to binge watch shows on Netflix. And so the show we just finished that we've been watching is this show called Alone. It's called Survivor. It's like Survivor, but it's like to a whole nother level. There's these 10 contestants that are picked They're survival experts, and there's a disclaimer right at the beginning that says, don't try this at home. These are trained survival experts. And these 10 people, they have to pick 10 survival items that they can take out, and they get dropped out in the middle of the Arctic by themselves. Like, there's nobody else around them. They're not close to anybody else. They don't even know where anybody else is in the Arctic. And what they have to do is they have to survive the longest. They have no idea when anybody else is saying that they're done or they're through or given up. They just have to keep going. Well, we were watching this one episode the other night, and there's this guy on there who, like, when we were watching it, I'm like, that dude's going to win it. Like, he seemed to understand it better than everybody else. He had an amazing shelter that he built, all this stuff, and I'm like, he's going to win. And there's this moment where he had just caught a fish, and that's a big deal when you find food out there. And he catches this fish, and he opens it up, and he's filleting, and he's like, there's some bacteria in here. I got to be careful about eating this because I could get really sick, and that would jeopardize everything. Well, he ends up eating the fish, and later on that night, just a few hours later, during the show, they have to set up their own cameras. It's dark. All you can hear is the noises. Like, he's really sick. And it's kind of disgusting listening to it, but like, he is not feeling very well. By the next morning, the camera's on him, and you see him, and he's down on his knees, writhing in pain in his stomach, and he's hurting, and he's like, man, in this moment, like, I was watching it, and I'm thinking, man, this is exactly where we are sometimes in life. He's writhing in pain. He can't do it anymore, and he's like, there's something inside of me that's just not right. There's something that's taking over. And it's in this moment, as he's writhing in pain, he gets up again, and he has this satellite phone that the show had given him, and he dials the number to the producers, and he says these words. He says, "This is Donnie. I'm officially tapping out." You see, he knew that he couldn't do it on his own. He knew that he needed the help of someone else. And maybe, like in that show, maybe today, that's what God has been saying to you, is maybe today some of you need to say, "Hey, God, this is Nate. I just want you to know that I've been trying to do this on my own for far too long, but I can't do it anymore. There's something inside of me that's just too much for me to handle on my own. I give up. I'm tapping out. I need your help." You see, saying the words "I give up" is not an admission of failure. It is an act of faith. It's realizing that you and I, we will never have the power that we need to get control of all these things in our life by ourselves, that we need God's power, that we can't do it without Him. And so as we close our time today, let me just say this. Maybe for some of you today, maybe it's time to stop trying to do it on your own and begin relying on God and His power and His strength to get you through some of the difficulties in life. You know, next weekend here at Compass is a decision weekend. I can't wait. Like, we just had a baptism class for our Compass kids, and that place was packed. Kids are making decisions to follow Jesus with their life. And during the first service, we had a couple people come forward and grab these towels, which I'll talk about here in a minute, and make that decision to follow Jesus with their life. And they're going to get baptized next week as well. And there's people who came to our baptism class last week who are getting baptized. And I think God's on the move right now. I believe that in our campus here. I believe that. But maybe today is the day for some of you that you need to say those words, "God, I give up. I'm going to stop trying to control things on my own." Maybe this is a day where you need to say, "I want to give God everything. I want to give Him my all for the very first time." And you make the best decision that you could ever make to follow Him with your life today. And you can do that in just a minute. We're going to sing this song, and if you're ready to do that and take that step, you can come to the front. There are towels on either side here. You can grab those, and Erica and myself will be up front here. We'd love to talk to you and pray with you about that. Or maybe there's some of you are walking with God for a while, but you've run in the opposite direction of God. Maybe it's time to recommit your life to Him. Maybe that's what you need to do today. Maybe you need to signify that and just say, "I give up. I give up trying to do it by myself. God, I'm giving it back to you." You can come to the front. We'd love to pray about that with you as well. Or if you're here today and you're just struggling, if you're going through a difficult season and you need prayer, we want to pray with you. If you're at home and you're watching this right now, you can text the word Connect NFW right now to 94,000, and we're going to reach out to you this week. And if you live in another state, like, we'll get you connected to a pastor somewhere. We'll help you make those decisions that you need to make in your life. If you need to be baptized, like, we want to help you. I have friends all over the United States. We'll help you find a place to get baptized wherever you're watching this from. But today, I want to invite all of us to say those words, I give up, and give it over to God. And so we're going to sing this song, and as we do, if you need to make that decision for the first time, I'm going to invite you to come as we sing. If you need to recommit in your life, you can come. Or if you just need prayer, you can come at this time. But right now, I'm going to invite you, would you stand with me as we sing this song? And if you need to make a decision today, you can come at this time.